In last Sunday's homily, if you remember, Father John shared that we have a God that doesn't wait for us to seek him. He comes and walks with us with these open arms of mercy. Well, once again, in this week's gospel, we hear about two disciples on that Easter day walking away from Jerusalem with confusion and disappointment, talking about how expectations of Jesus came crashing down on Good Friday. They thought they were finished and had no future at all. Yet, even though they were walking in the wrong direction, Jesus encounters them and walks with them on their journey. Brothers and sisters, in these COVID times, I invite you to stop and reflect with me on the road to Emmaus Gospel. Isn't this our own experience today? If there is one thing that we have learned from our isolation and physical distancing, is that each one of us has a deep, holy longing for sincere relationships as we journey through our seclusion, including a deeper relationship with our Lord. Sooner or later, God breaks through into our lives. I invite you now to close your eyes and imagine that you're out for a walk this afternoon. Keeping in mind the precautions in place, you're wearing a mask and making sure you're not walking near anyone. At some point, you realize a stranger is walking with you. He seems to be settling into a pace that matches your own. He's clearly not worried about physical distancing. He looks at your solemn face and asks, "What are you thinking about as you walk along?" And you reply, "Are you the only one who does not know of the things that have taken place here these days?" He looks at with you love and says, "What things?" So you continue. There is a pandemic that has spread around the world. We have to stay 6 feet away from each other. We have closed all the schools. Millions of people in our country are unemployed. We have to wear masks everywhere we go. The virus has spread so quickly. People got so sick, and so many people have died all alone without loved ones. There is so much confusion. There is so much uncertainty on when we'll be able to return to the way things were before. I'm trying to be stoic for my family, but the reality is I'm scared. And although it is Jesus that has been walking with you all along, you don't realize his presence. But it doesn't matter because he just continues walking and listening. He doesn't try to explain away what's happening, but rather our Lord takes an intimate interest in your life, your hopes, your fears, because what you have to offer is an authentic telling of your current story. You don't need to put on a brave face. Jesus just walks with you at this moment, developing a relationship, spending time with you. So, just like the disciples, you invite him to stay during this time of pandemic uncertainty, to stay during this time of darkness. And Jesus accepts your invitation. It is when your heart begins burning that your eyes are opened, and you recognize that Jesus is the one walking with you. It is then that you come to accept human limitations, learn how to share in suffering, toss aside any anger with God, and see how God is at work in all of our lives through this pandemic and our own personal struggles. When we, like the disciples in our gospel, accept the invitation to encounter Jesus in our daily lives, we must now not be afraid to share that experience with others, because that's what people who have an encounter with the risen Jesus Christ do. Jesus' model of evangelization is treating every single person we meet, no matter what they look like, how they treat us, as if we were interacting with our Lord on the road to Emmaus. Jesus wants us to love others the way he loves us, and then the way we should love him in return. One of the words that most frequently spoken by Pope Francis is the word accompaniment. And to accompany is to be a companion on someone else's journey. In fact, it was only a few months after he assumed his papacy in the summer of 2013 at World Youth Day that he challenged the leadership of the church with these words: "We need a church capable of walking at people's side, of doing more than simply listening to them. A church which accompanies them on their journey. A church able to make sense of the night contained in the flight of so many of our brothers and sisters from Jerusalem. A church which realizes that the reasons why people leave also contains reasons why they can eventually return." Accompaniment is slowing, being, non-doing long enough to allow space to walk with another person. It is slowing enough to walk with a neighbor going through a divorce, walk with your spouse who is overwhelmed by the pandemic, or walk with a friend who is struggling with their faith and true Christian identity. Accompaniment is slowing enough to realize Jesus is walking with you, and brave enough to begin the walk with others. I'd like to give you a little homework for this week, and please accept it. Think about this question: who can I accompany this week that needs comfort and consolation? Maybe it's a family who is directly affected by COVID-19, a grandparent or a senior who is isolated in their care facility, a young parent that is struggling balancing work, children, spouse, and personal care, the homeless that continue to be more and more vulnerable. All of them are in need of our care, comfort, consolation, and the assurance that they are not alone in their struggle. Like each one of us, they are all on a journey. I also would like at this special time to consider accompanying a special group of people that are experiencing heightened levels of loneliness and isolation as a result of social distancing, and at the same time a group of people that is not experiencing a decline in their faith. In a survey published just earlier this week, it showed that 50% of this group reported they don't have anyone to talk to about how they are feeling. 44% of this group reported feeling isolated because no one has even reached out to them. The group in this study was labeled as one of the most lonely and isolated generations that have ever existed. You probably figured it out. I'm talking about young adults from 18 to 28 years old. Those of us who are no longer young, we need to find ways of accompanying the voices and concerns of young people, just as Jesus accompanied Cleopas and his friend on the road to Emmaus. You see, our global health crisis will likely be the defining moment in the life of young adults and youth today. Our young adults strongly value connections and friendship with their peers, but they also need other adults who can walk with them, listen to them, and be a reference for them. They're looking for mentors who can walk with them and help them discern how to live a more meaningful life that is built on true encounters, friendships, and yes, our Lord. Again, I'd like to quote Pope Francis in his most recent apostolic exhortation, Christus Vivit, written about the Synod of young people. This is what he said: "We need to make more room for the voices of the young people to be heard. Listening makes possible an exchange of gifts in a context of empathy. At the same time, it sets the conditions for a preaching of the gospel that can touch the heart truly, decisively, and fruitfully. And it also sets the table for an invitation to join us at the breaking of the bread. My friends, accompaniment may be uncomfortable and sometimes frightening work, but Jesus has promised to walk with us. Even in our longing for the Eucharistic food that feeds us for this journey, we always know that no matter where our Lord leads, whatever he asks, for each one of us that walk with him, all will be well. All will be well.